Conservatives, kids, and puberty blockers. Let's see what CNN has to say, guys. All right. Supreme Court's transgender care fight creates conservative reckoning over parental rights. Conservative groups have for years sought to reduce the government's sway over parents' child-rearing choices, particularly when it comes to decisions about school and health care. But the Supreme Court's upcoming and potentially explosive transgender care case is dividing conservatives, with many of those same groups backing Tennessee's ban on puberty blockers and hormone treatments, which critics say inject the state into family medical decisions and overrides parental rights. See, it's interesting the angle that CNN takes on this, because CNN is a left-biased organization, but in order to sway you, they're making a conservative argument here. What they're not telling you is the connection that puberty blockers and hormone treatments have to sterilizing children. And they're not telling you the connection that these synthetic hormones have to major cancers. And so this is extremely dangerous for kids, and it is a health issue. In fact, there should be a larger health concern addressed with the application of these puberty blockers and hormone treatments, simply because of the risk and connection to cancers and how much they damage your body and how they can sterilize you. A lot of people are not being informed, and I don't personally believe that they are being given the opportunity to make what would be legally considered an informed choice when they are talking to their doctors about a lot of these things, because these risks are not being expressed to them. And I'm really glad that we have this opportunity in this article to talk about it, because it's a serious issue. There's health concerns with these medications. I do believe that parents have the right to make their own choices with their kids, but at the same time, there's an intersection of the danger of these synthetic and invasive interventions that they have on children. I don't know where the line is. Personally, I don't know. I'm not, a father yet, and this is not a relevant issue to me yet, but it's a good question and a conversation that we need to have, something that we should definitely be exploring. As a result, some notable conservatives are supporting the Biden administration's challenge to the law. Since when does a conservative say the state knows what's best for my child? Said former Virginia Rep. Barbara Comstock, an anti-Trump Republican who opposes the Tennessee law. Now, it's interesting, the partisan divide, because anti-Trump Republicans are essentially rhinos, Republican in name only. And you'll find that a lot of them go back to the old guard Republican establishment, which were warmongers, which were, hey, let's send factories overseas, screw American jobs. It's all about more money for the rich. So it's interesting to see an anti-Trump Republican on this side and not a pro-Trump Republican, which tends to be more in line with the values of classical liberalism and individual freedom. And so it's interesting because I don't consider these anti-Trump Republicans and these Republicans that have connections to the old guard Republican establishment to be real Republicans. I consider them to be rhinos and part of the uniparty establishment, which really are just corporatist neoliberals, which will use any excuse they can to try to push some sort of agenda that empowers the upper class and suppresses the lower classes. Let's see. If you decide a state can do this, then it puts all parental discussions at risk of being overruled by the government. That's interesting. Now, it depends on why in the law it's justified for the government to be involved here. Is it justified because of the medical risk? Is it justified because, a parent is not allowed to tell a child, hey, yeah, sure, you can stab yourself in the leg. I'll let you do that. Or, hey, sure, yeah, I'll watch you cut your hand off. I'll let you do that. A parent is not allowed to do that. That is neglect and allowing harm to occur to their child. I forget the charges, but a parent is not allowed to do that. And so if you're able to establish that these medications are so dangerous that someone needs to be able to consent on their own and be able to make an informed decision, or that they're so dangerous that the use of these medications equates to harm, then that is an argument in court that I don't think would violate parental rights. Now, if otherwise, I think that they're absolutely right. I think that this absolutely poses a danger of using right-wing cultural issues to then push more state intervention and give more centralized authority to our government, which would not be good. I'm going to read through this article and then give you my opinion on what I think a good solution is. But let's continue here, guys. The Supreme Court will hear arguments December 4th in the most important transgender rights case the justices have ever tackled, reviewing a Tennessee law enacted last year that bans gender-affirming care for minors and imposes civil penalties on doctors who violate the prohibitions. Civil penalties is interesting, so it's not criminal penalties. Interesting. Gender-affirming surgeries are not at issue because a lower court tossed out a challenge to those procedures. Though the High Court declined to consider the parental rights question when it took the case earlier this year, the debate is nevertheless playing out in briefings and may come up during the court's oral arguments. So this is interesting because it's civil penalties. So this, I wonder if, because it's exclusively civil penalties, if this changes the legal nuances and actually has an outcome in terms of the Supreme Court's decision. The Biden administration appeal has landed on the court's docket at a moment when transgender rights have become a roiling culture war issue for Republicans, with President-elect Donald Trump denouncing the transgender craziness and South Carolina Rep. Nancy Mace attempting to ban transgender women from using women's restrooms at the U.S. Capitol and at other federal buildings. Tennessee, and many conservatives who support the state's position, argues parental rights are not a factor in the case. After all, they say states have a long history of regulating medicine for people of all ages. Even adults lack a substantive due process right to demand access to a particular medication, the state told the Supreme Court. That lack of a right to certain drugs, the state claims, dooms the Biden administration's appeal. That is an interesting variable. What are the nuances of that? Now, drug classification also enters the realm. Are these puberty blockers and hormone therapy medications misclassified as drugs, and is that a relevant part of the legal nuances and access to minors? That's another question. Put up or shut up moment. Conservative groups have lined up in federal courts to make nearly identical parental rights arguments in other cases. In one appeal that has been pending at the Supreme Court for months, a group of Wisconsin parents say their school district is violating parental rights by hiding transgender support plans, allowing students to change their pronouns and bathroom use without informing parents. Anti-abortion groups, meanwhile, have for years argued that parents must have a say in a minor's decision to end a pregnancy. So those are not identical cases at all. Those are not identical arguments. They're not even identical contexts. Very different nuances. I don't know why you're presenting it that way. That framing doesn't even work. 26 GOP-led states, including Tennessee, have enacted bans on at least some form of transgender-affirming care. But a few Republicans are bucking their party by focusing on the question of whether parents have a right, grounded in the 14th Amendment, to direct the medical care of their children. It's a bit of a reckoning for the Republican Party, said Alex Lundry, who worked on Mitt Romney's 2012 presidential campaign and who signed a brief in the Tennessee case, along with dozens of current and former GOP elected officials and aides opposing the state law. You certainly have a lot of people on the right calling for more parental rights, particularly in the realm of education. Also signing a brief were Republican state lawmakers in Iowa, Kentucky, and Missouri, a former spokesperson for the Republican National Committee, a former chief of staff to the late Senator John McCain. Brian Burgess, an appellate lawyer at the firm Goodwin Procter, who helped write the brief, said that while transgender care has become ideologically charged, there is a traditional conservative view towards the medical decisions being a judgment for families. In another brief supporting the Biden administration, a group of law professors focused on the historic practice of families directing medical care for their children, citing then controversial decision some made to inoculate their children against smallpox in the 18th century colonial America. I don't think it's interesting. I'm very interested in the nuances of where the line is between what is a medical decision and what is harming your child. And I think that is really where the nuances of the court are going to go, and the line that the court is going to take to try to decide this. Because the Supreme Court, I don't think that they're going to do anything to either expand or reduce the role of the state in terms of parental access or parental decision making. I think they're going to look for another angle to make a decision on this. Definitely. That brief, which is intended to appeal to the conservative justices' focus on history, is signed by Stephen Calabrese, a conservative law professor at Northwestern University. Yale law professor William Eskridge, who co-authored the brief, described the Tennessee case as a put-up-or-shut-up moment for the court's emphasis on history. If you want to be a historical-focused court, look at the history. Parental rights are not absolute. Although it took the Biden administration's appeal over Tennessee law, the Supreme Court did not grant a separate appeal from the transgender youth and families affected by the ban. That separate lawsuit specifically asked whether the law violates the fundamental right of parents to make decisions about the medical care of their children. It's not clear why the court granted the Biden administration appeal, but not the similar case from the families. But one effect of that decision is that parental rights won't squarely be at issue when the justices take the bench on Wednesday. In allowing the Tennessee ban to take effect last year, a divided Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals brushed aside parental rights arguments. Parents usually do know what's best for their children, but it added, becoming a parent does not create a right to reject democratically enacted laws. That's a really interesting justification, and I wonder if there's other justifications that CNN is ignoring here. Okay, here's the thing. I've got my own opinions on this, and I think that there's a distinction between what should be legal and what's moral, okay? And I think that in a lot of our cultural issues in society, we like to focus on using the government to solve our problems, and what that does is that allows the government to step in as our savior and our parent. And that promotes a cultural zeitgeist that pushes us towards neoliberalism, where our government is there to manage our relationships with each other, okay? And that gives the government so much more authority than it ever was supposed to have in our country. I think that the way to approach these cultural issues like this is to focus on education and promoting nuanced education to people. I think that focusing on psychological resilience and helping people maintain a fluid self-identity and helping people understand the nature of fulfillment and how to manage their Maslow's hierarchy of needs is the way to approach this stuff best. I don't think passing laws to ban this or ban that is really the move. I think that we have an education disparity in this country that really needs to be approached. I think that things like crime or issues like people's self-identity and what they struggle with are never going to be able to be satisfied or resolved until we address the psychological mechanisms behind them, which I think really comes down to helping people apply their Maslow's hierarchy of needs to their life in an intentional way. And so I think that the answer to this stuff is education. I know it hurts when you see people making these decisions. I know it hurts to see the pain, but the human species is a neural network. Each one of us exists to learn lessons and share those lessons with the people around us. So just because you're watching people go through pain does not mean that that is a bad thing. Those people are going through that pain so that they can learn and share what that pain means to the rest of us, to the rest of the community. And so, I think in a lot of ways, a lot of these kids that are being what some of us think of as mutilated, they're doing a service to our community that we don't yet understand. And the information that they gather and their life experience and what it is able to share with us later will give us information that is extremely valuable, especially if we can educate them to be self-aware and self-actualized people. That will help them communicate their lessons with us because it will help them understand their lessons. So control, I don't think control is the answer. I don't think when you see something scary or bad, running to daddy government to try to come save you is the answer. I think promoting education, I think responding to things in a methodical way as opposed to reacting to them is the answer. And I don't think everything needs to be solved with a law. I think a lot of things can be solved with a conversation and a pamphlet and just working to influence your community. So yeah, absolutely, guys. Yeah, that's my take on it. I appreciate you guys. I'll see you guys on the next one. Hopefully we got another one coming out today.